1 second, everyone. Yeah, there we go. We are all ready to go. So everything is going fine. Well, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is our 4th session of the course Tools for Post-Conflict Urban Recovery in Ukraine, organized by the TU Delft in collaboration with UN, the Ukraine, the Netherlands Urban Network, the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology in Australia, and Zuyd University here in the Netherlands, and a bunch of Ukrainian partners. My name is Roberto Rocco, and I'm an associate professor of spatial planning and strategy at the Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. This course, as you know, seeks to discuss spatial strategies for an integrated urban recovery in post-conflict settings, investigating the process of reconstruction and what the notion of building back better implies. It's a difficult expression for me to pronounce, building back better. Tackling inequalities, strengthening the capacities of local actors, and pursuing a green, resilient, and inclusive urban recovery anchored on sound spatial planning, design, and policy. So I have a disclaimer. Of course, every session I say the same, but in the development of this course, we wanted to use the term post-conflict as an open term that allows us to converse with colleagues, not only from Ukraine, but also from other areas affected by conflict and violent shocks. However, it is important to acknowledge that language has been used as a tool for disinformation and the erosion of public debate. And we want to fully acknowledge that what is going on in Ukraine at the moment is a full, senseless, and tragic war. So it's a real war perpetrated by a madman on a fully sovereign state. While the war is not yet over, we want to salute our friends and colleagues from Ukraine who bravely bear the brunt of this war and whom we wish to wholeheartedly support. All instructors in this course are working voluntarily as a service to the reconstruction of Ukraine and in support of our Ukrainian friends and colleagues. But today we have with us Dr. John van Oorschot and Dr. Nurhan Abujidi. I'll start with Nurhan, who is going to speak first. She is the leader of SURD, Smart Urban Redesign Research Group at Zuyd University since March 2018. This research group focuses on improving livability, quality of life, and well-being in the built environment, and devises solutions for the future in the fields of energy, materials, and health. They focus on improving the efficiency and usability of the built environment and public spaces. And together with Nurhan, we also have John van Oorschot. John is a senior lecturer and researcher and program leader of circular building at the same research group at Zuyd University. His passion links to research and innovation projects into circular building and modernization of the construction industry. We generally would have our Ukrainian commentator, Roman Pushko, but I think he is unable to join us today. But we do have Paulo Goroszewski, who is going to maybe, Paulo, you could say a few words at the end, if you don't mind. This comes as a surprise to him. I know there are questions about the final assignment. As you know, you have to be 6 of the 8 sessions to be able to receive a certificate, and we are also sending the assignment again here at this in the link that I put in here in the chat. But for now, thanks a lot for being here, everyone. And Nurhan and John, the floor is yours. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thanks, Roberto, for the introduction. And I would like also to thank TU Delft for giving us the chance to share our experience with our colleagues in Ukraine and all over the world. So very quickly, I will have a short introduction about our mission. I also would like to make some parallels between the Palestinian context and the Dutch context and some lessons that we learned, at least myself, because I worked for 20 years in the Palestinian territories, the occupied Palestinian territories, where also like similarities can be also seen with the Ukrainian context, without talking, of course, about the political framework. And then John can elaborate more on some tools and tips learning from the Superlocal case study. So Smart Urban Redesign Research Center looks at neighborhoods focusing on 3 flows: material, energy, and people. And our ultimate goal is to contribute to energy neutral, circular, vital, and neighborhoods. Of course, now having this parallel discussion between the Netherlands and the occupied Palestinian territories, for me, it is actually where I find like sometimes different types of destruction outside war zones also cause certain traumas, loss of identity, also losing the most important physical infrastructure that connects people to their heritage, identity, past, and also being a community in that very specific context. From there, the parallels that I would like to share with you now. Of course, in the Palestinian occupied territories for decades, there is an ongoing process of destruction, reconstruction that is taking place. And I want here to highlight that the destruction goes beyond the physical built environment, infrastructure. It's about people's homes. It's about their being a community with a certain identity, heritage, and history connected to that physical built environment and infrastructure for the Palestinian case. And I see many parallels also with the Ukrainian case. Very shortly in Limburg, and why we see that also these parallels between other types of destruction. Limburg in the Netherlands, South Netherlands, is also sort of flourished thanks to the mining industry for decades. But in the 70s, all this industrial heritage and physical, of course, heritage was whipped out of, in a matter of 2 to 3 years. And you can imagine that all of this infrastructure was also connected to the mining communities, the migrants who came to the Netherlands to work in this industry. And it meant a lot for them. It was also about the way their built environment was composed, their social networks, spatial networks, memories, heritage, and of course, history was totally disappeared just in a very few years. And of course, within this background, you can notice till now, from the 70s till now, that it was a huge trauma for the local community, where they lost their sources of income, their social and spatial connections, and so forth. And within this background, there was also a huge economic void after this closure. And now we are working on, okay, how can you make an urban development and proceed towards achieving circular, energy neutral, and vital neighborhoods, while it seems like time froze for the inhabitants of South Limburg. So the tips that I will now bring, or the lessons learned actually for our Ukrainian colleagues, is that, yeah, in the waiting for big structural projects that will be expensive and long-term, waiting for this war to end and then start the reconstruction process, and also being very much aware that foreign aid has always political agendas that might not fit with the people's ambitions about how their cities need to be reconstructed. So to answer these questions, we are also calling that to use tactical urbanism to facilitate the start of urban transformation. And how can you do that? Learning from the Limburg context. These are actually the main pillars of the actions we are doing now in diverse neighborhoods in 5 cities in South Limburg. And the most important one is using this though it is a trauma and dramatic situation, use it as an opportunity to reimagine the future, a bright and prosperous future. And that's why you need to look at it from integral vision, from an interdisciplinary way. The way we organize it, for example, in Heerlen, we try to engage our students, professionals from different forms, bachelor, master, and PhD from different disciplines, to look at very specific contexts, challenges, questions about the urban transformation, together with our partners like social housing associations, and most importantly with the local citizens, to develop that vision from an integral perspective. Of course, the production via very intensive design weeks, challenge weeks, we try to look at small-scale urban interventions in a way that we can start also like transforming the vision into more strategic projects and actions. The three other pillars is first, ownership. Ownership is not only by of course, the stakeholders like the government, but ownership and commitment and engagement requires all engaged stakeholders to be like active in this process. Most importantly are the local community, because they are the one who needs also to define what kind of identity they wanted to produce and or maybe sustain in their neighborhood. So their engagement is crucial in this stage. And the third one is start small. Of course, you cannot just solve all the problems at once. We need to see what kind of strategic and tactical interventions are needed. So we are promoting action research in co-creation with local community and stakeholders. So we are physically present in the neighborhood via all these design weeks and different forms of activities that we organized during the whole year, challenges and so forth. And we try to make it also in a dialogue. If you see here with the local community, we try also to engage them to collect their ideas, ambitions, and perspective for the development of neighborhood in an informal and formal way, qualitative and quantitative research. And the organization of these activities also requires us either to live in the neighborhood, to be permanently present in the neighborhood, to pick up more the invisible actually dynamics that is important for that neighborhood and also for the local community, especially when we talk about neighborhoods with a huge cultural diversity that we find very important to celebrate as also the identity that presents the community in these neighborhoods. An example is the Aurora social housing block, where you can see as a strategic, very small project, where you can see that this parking plot, we wanted to transform it into a community space, but at the same time, it should be climate adaptive, it should be circular, and also celebrate the diversity of that local space. We started with developing different visions and with different challenges and workshops during actually 2 years till now. And just quickly going, this is how it looked 2 years ago. And via the development of these strategic interventions, we developed a certain prototype from recycled materials, in this case is wood. And we tried to experiment for at least 1 year with how people are like acting, reacting, or using this intervention to see if we fulfill their ambition and the needs in this very specific space. And now this is how it looks after the structural intervention, adding more and more via our monitoring process, where we also collected more information about what didn't work out from the temporary intervention and how we can improve performance of that very specific space. And you can see here, this is how it looked like last week with the trees, and it is flourishing very nicely. And now it became the operational office for the Zuyd students and the stakeholders to prepare other strategic interventions in the nearby park in this picture. The last point I want also to share is about using and focusing on local resources for value creation. And the value creation goes beyond the material perspective, environmental perspective. It is also about the economic and the social values. Just examples from the Palestinian context. And here from the Nablus Historic Center reconstruction and the Gaza, people use the existing demolishing material. Sorry, I have flu. To reconstruct their heritage sites, and we build also like some temporary housing. We're capitalizing on existing also building techniques for heritage sites were very important to maintain the heritage identity for the historic centers of the cities. I'm so sorry. Other professionals and young architects also used other approaches to use like local material like the earth architecture to produce new forms of housing like we see here in the houses that was built in Jericho. And I will end up this very quick introduction with a very interesting and unique innovation by an engineer in Gaza due to the lack of construction material due to the siege for 20 years. He created a new type of material, which is a new brick using earth and with some added material to create like a new building material, which is now tested in Gaza and being scaled up in other locations. I'm so sorry. So what I'm trying to say here, it is very important to be tactical and to be pragmatic. While the war is just going on, we need to keep feeding all the people who are interested in the reconstruction processes in a way that they can have joint forces and see what we, with the existing resources, skills, for example, from the students, from young professionals, but also from architects, and also the local stakeholders, the social housing associations, the government like the municipalities and so forth, to see how you can start small in the neighborhood with a small scale interventions that are strategic enough to improve life quality and maintain people's hope to continue the reconstruction after the war. And I will leave it here. This presentation will be shared with you for more information for using these sources. And I hope John can inspire you more with the Superlocal case. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nurhan. I will start sharing my screen. It's almost, I think, the most tricky part of my presentation. Roberto, can you confirm that I am in screen? Okay. Yes, well, Roberto, thank you for introducing Zuyd and myself for this lecture, and also thank you for having us here and providing us the opportunity to present some of the research we are doing. And the goal for me for the next 25 minutes is to inspire you, maybe a little bit to provoke you, and this will end up in a short workshop where I try to collect some of your reflections and some of your ideas on the presentation. I will share with you in a minute. Yes, indeed, as Nurhan already said, is that I base my my presentation on a Superlocal project, and I will like to start with first very briefly discussing the program. I will start with a short lecture. In addition to the introduction Nurhan already provided, then I will introduce briefly a breakout session, our next workshop. Then we start working for 15, maybe 20 minutes on this workshop. Tell a little bit more about it later on in the presentation, and then we come back to the plenary room to discuss some of the findings with some final comments. Yeah, it will be Pavlo, I think, instead of Roman, but to conclude this session. And I like to start with this picture. Yeah, typical 10-story apartment buildings, and you can find them everywhere in Europe, from the far north to the south, from east to west. So these apartment blocks may very well stand in the Ukraine somewhere. However, this picture is taken in the south of the Netherlands, close to our university. And whatever happens with this building, at some point in time, these buildings, tend to become obsolete. This can be for economic or technical reasons, or they are damaged by conflict, by war activities. Unfortunate. In the middle, the same apartment buildings. On the left, what is happening in the Netherlands at the moment. These typical apartment buildings are demolished if they become obsolete. On the right side, it's not a demolition project, but it's a picture I took from a news feed about war damage close to Kiev. And what is very unfortunate is that demolishing these properties in this way, it also comes with a lot of loss of value, and that's for a large part material value, valuable materials being lost and turned into waste. And this fits within the make waste economy, which is now most prominent around the world. At the same time, it's not only material value that's gonna lost, but it's also social value becoming lost, because this building was somebody's home. So, and this building also represents social structures, groups of people living together in these structures. So besides all these material, technical values being lost with demolition, intentionally or not, that's also coming with the loss of other values being lost forever. Well, let's see, or you can turn this around. So this is the case. Here you see this a small neighborhood somewhere in the Netherlands, in the south, close to our university, and there were these 4 typical building blocks and the apartment buildings, 10 stories high, each containing 100 apartments. And they were built in a period after the Second World War in the Netherlands. This were still of the program of providing affordable housing to the Dutch population. And it represents a really high social cohesion, so people really living together closely and nearby. And what people experienced, that's what people tell us who lived actually in these building apartment blocks, is they had this kind of street feeling. So every floor in the apartment building represents a small street. But what we did is that we demolished one of the apartment buildings, and then then recognized that this is not the way to go. So what can we do different with these apartment building? How can we retain as much of the values these buildings represent? Well, this is a picture of the same area. And it's taken somewhere in October last year. Still work is ongoing. It will be finished next month. And here you already see some of the things that has changed. So there is one building block refurbished, the other 3 has been vanished. But what we intended to do is, well, in restructuring this area, we made the agreement with each other. Okay, for this. For rebuilding, establishing this area, we don't want to use new materials. We only gonna use materials which we can mine from these apartment buildings. So on the left, you see some 3 single family houses. You see some building blocks in the middle, and also the public space, which is here still work in progress, is fully redeveloped with only using materials available in this area. At the same point, we also said, okay, none of the materials is allowed to move out. So we really want to make a circular loop within this neighborhood. That was not only the only ambition we had for this neighborhood. We also said, okay, let's try to also install a closed water cycle. So with the same approach, we said water should be used in multiple cycles and not leaving the area, for example, to the sewage system. And as already referred to, this apartment building also represents a social structure, and that's also something we like to retain. So what we try to do is to provide new housing for people who like to stay in this neighborhood. So they were the first clients of this redevelopment. So these were the core concepts for redeveloping this area. And what we did. We built upon the theory of the circular economy, trying to close material loops in this particular area. And we did not do it from behind our desktop, because we have multiple reports in line with what is published by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and the lead authority in circular construction. But we really try to put things put these initiatives into practice. Well, here you see that in a more graphical way, the famous butterfly model. On the right side, the technical loops. With various strategies, we try to keep the materials as long as possible in use in the building industry. And whatever kind of materials we like to introduce, because we need to add some new materials, then they should be based on renewables. That's what the left side of this diagram is representing. Well, what we also added to this definition is that take into account that mining all the materials to make construction products out of it, even the production and transport of the construction products itself, requires a lot of energy. And most of the time, they are the result of burning coal, charcoal, or gas. And this has an enormous carbon emission comes along with it. So what we claim is, okay, well, keeping the materials in a multi-cycle use in the construction industry, this should be done based on 100% renewables. So, however, this is maybe quite a straightforward definition. These are some examples of famous Dutch circular buildings. Well, there are some issues with that, because there are still no really accepted validation models which really based on which you really can claim that you have a circular building. And still, this is something on a scientific debate for developing tools and concepts which you can use to really validate if your building or your building product is fully circular. Well, making life a little bit more easy, I simplified the model. So vertically, it's a construction process, and we not start from the top. That we start with transporting all kinds of new materials to the building site. Now we start from demolishing, taking apart the existing apartment buildings, and try to come up with solutions how to reuse these materials. Now, well, concrete, that's apparently, of course, that concrete is the most used building material in these type of structures. So we start with developing circular concepts, how we can reuse in various way the concrete materials. And we came up with 5 scenarios. You can cut out entire apartment blocks for reuse. That's on the top left. On the right of that, you can also do it with panelized concrete elements. On a lower level of circularity, it's also able, you can, of course, select specific concrete elements for reprocessing and use them in a different way. And at the lowest level, you can, of course, recycle materials to make from old concrete, new concrete, and start erecting new structures. Or you can make single building products out of that. That's on the top right, some construction blocks. And these are quite all, at least for the Netherlands, these are relatively new and out of the ordinary construction technology. So nobody can tell you how this exactly works out. So we started small. That's on the top left. On the left down side of the slide. We start with a small pavilion, a trial building, and we try to figure out if these concepts might work. And with some first trial experience, we start experimented with the 3 small housing units, and the most valuable concepts, these were finally demonstrated in a single housing family housing project on a larger scale. Now, to show you some results of these experiments, was one of the most most interesting or spectacular experiments we did. What we simply did, we cut out a full apartment block and craned them down to be reused near the existing structure of the apartment building, just as the bare structure of a new housing unit. Very spectacular. It could has also have gone spectacularly sideways, but in the end we managed to crane out these apartment units to reuse. We also tried to see if we can make new concrete out of the old concrete. So what we did, we craned the existing concrete building into 5 small parts, and we start to innovate a mixture, new concrete mixture, to try to find out a way and build up the tools to actually make the concrete on site. And then we start making on a small scale various objects with this recycled concrete. Well, some other small experiments we did. This is with just concrete rubble. We start use it as masonry in the building. Looks like if it's or natural limestone blocks used, for example, what you can find in south of France. But it's actually concrete. And you also see here in the facade that various objects are very used as architectural elements to decorate the building. Yeah, if you're experimenting, not everything works. Some innovations simply fail. And this was one of the experiments, what was with the 2D concrete slabs. So we were not able to crane them out. They all broke. So this is something, that was really a failure. So the technology was failing us. So this experiment simply failed. We also constructed various bricks, but this is very new technology. This is not poured into a formwork. No, actually, this is made out of vibro compaction. So it's by pressing and vibrating the concrete mixture, then you can make these kind of forms of brickwork without a wet procedure of as you use by pouring concrete traditionally. But also, this is a very expensive and also still immature technology, and we were not able to construct anything about out of it. It's still a work in progress. Well, some impacts. What do you gain out of it? Has this an environmental impact? Now, you see on the left side of the graph of the chart, you see this baseline bar. This is the amount of carbon emission that will be exposed if you construct the bare structure of these housing you see below in a more traditional traditional way. And we compare that with constructing the same structures, but then with recycling, reusing existing materials. And you see that, craning out 1 or 2 apartment units as we did, and that's not very interesting in terms of environmental impact. It's really exceeding the carbon emission, and that's in particular due to all the heavy transport and equipment you need for doing that. If you can repeat it a little bit more, well, then you can lower. That's the third column in this graph. Then you can, if you can replicate, you can really lower the amount of carbon emission per unit, because you can more efficiently use your equipment. But then what is not taken into account here is, with craning out more apartments, you also have to transport them to a larger a distance from the existing apartment building. So this is not taken into account. This should actually be a little bit higher. Well, hypothetically, also dived into reusing slabs. This didn't work out for structural reasons. But you also see here, if you only crane out a couple of slabs, well, it's really carbon intensive. But if you can replicate it multiple times, then indeed yeah, the emission of carbon by the equipment will be divided over more elements, and it will become more efficient. But again, here with carrying out more elements, yeah, the transport will also increase, and that's still not taken into account. Pouring concrete on site, that's very promising. However, here you see that we were only constructing very simple objects. It was not an apartment building, and then you need a higher quality of concrete. More cement more binder is added to that structure, and then also more, and that comes also together with more carbon emission. So also here, potentially it will not save much. What has more impact potential is using the prefab. So what we did is pouring concrete on site was very complex. We had a lot of quality issues. So what we did, we transported a lot of these particles to a factory, in which that's where we poured prefab concrete panels made out of recycled concrete. And then you see that that's the same amount of carbon emission as with the baseline. However, you have to take into account that we use only a fraction of natural resources as with the traditional concrete. And at the same time, if you make prefab panels, which you can easily be disassembled after the first use cycle, and can use them multiple times, looking at what the potential of the slabs, then, well, this is becoming very interesting, because then the number will drop drastically.
John, there is a question in the Q&A that maybe you could address. Can you see it, or?
No, I can't see it, but maybe you can.
Yeah, it's from Alice. She's asking, do you see any possible scenarios for reuse of concrete panels in Ukraine, any other than downcycling? She thinks that the quality of construction in the Netherlands was way better, and mostly it was up to 20 years old before the demolition, when in Ukraine's case, it's up to 50 years old.
That's a very good question. And I have, unfortunately, not a simple answer. Potentially, I think that recycling is what will happen in the end. But I know also from experience from Estonian, for example, that in some buildings they are far thicker slabs than we have in the Netherlands. And they also put more steel bars in it, so the structural integrity is better actually than what we have in the Netherlands. So it's something what you have to investigate, which you need to research building by building, and it's also making it very complex and also time consuming. So yeah, it depends. But age in itself, 30 or 50 years, is not a problem. So concrete can last for thousands of years. So age is not in itself an indicator. Hopefully, this is answering your question. Well, costs. Well, I want to dive into that very deeply, but yeah, as you can imagine, it's far more expensive than traditional construction, because all the work you need to do for mining the materials before you can reuse it again, and that's a little bit less efficient than using just traditional mined resources, natural resources. I already have visited this. Just a small wrap up. But I like to focus on something else. I like to go back in time, in a period that we are also facing some challenges with rebuilding the Netherlands after the Second World War. And just shortly after the Second World War, well, this was this popular phrase that housing shortage was public enemy #1. So there was really a problem that there was not enough housing available for people living in the Netherlands or coming back to the Netherlands, because so many buildings were damaged during the war. This was then one of the priorities, although not the top one priority of the Dutch government. So the Dutch government was really focusing on rebuilding the economy, not on providing housing. That came third or fourth as a priority. But then we had from 1948 onwards, we had some support of the Marshall Plan for rebuilding our lost dwellings. And well, in that period, the Dutch government really took the lead in building new housing. And there was, despite that, now we're living in a time that's the government is there's a lot of distrust in governments. Is in those days there was really strong social support and commitment for rebuilding the Netherlands, and we were really has this utopian belief that we could really build a better country after all the hard time of the war. The governmental program ran for almost 25 years, so 1945 up to somewhere in early 70s almost, and this led to the construction of 1.5 million affordable housing units. To put it in perspective, at today we have 7.5 million housings altogether in the Netherlands. So this was a substantial part, and these apartment buildings I was just discussing were just an example of these construction efforts. And what was a key challenge in those days? So there was really a shortage of almost everything. There were no financial resources, there were no building materials, no equipment, and above all, there was no workforce for really doing the work. And so it was really people at the local level were really forced to do it themselves. So despite the government program start running after the war, it really took some years for which people have to take care of their own housing. This is some old pictures and an old poster. Let's do it all together. People were very motivated on just start working on rebuilding the Netherlands. And this was really, from this time you can also find these typical Dutch terraced houses, which you can see on the lower side of this slide. This was really built in the early 50s as part of that plan. Give you an idea how this looked like. Well, this is some old graphs from these policies. I had to do a deep dive and look in old books to find this chart. But the chart's in Dutch, unfortunately. But the numbers on the top row that will tell you enough. So over 500,000. Buildings were damaged from lightly to totally destroyed, but at least were inhabitable. And that out of over 2 million properties in the Netherlands, so that was almost 25% of the dwellings were inhabitable. That has a huge effect on society in these in those times. So policy was really focused on how to cope with this housing shortage. So there was a plan to do it before the end of the 60s. So the bars represent the housing shortage. The line is the progression that should be made for covering this. But it took at least 10 years longer, up to the 70s, for this was really solved. And it was really guided by the government. So the government decided, was very active in the urban planning. They did all the planning in the way that they said, oh, that are the location where should be constructed. The housing type was predefined. Even the number of housing units was predefined. And even more, they also steered the production. They even steered the workforce, and they determined where people should work on which kind of projects. Well, These are also some pictures of the typical architecture, what was coming out of that time. As you, on the top left, you see this typical Dutch terraced housing. You can find them everywhere in the country, still existing. On the top right, this is a kind of variant, low, with 3-4 level apartment buildings. And on the top, on the low right, you see this duplex housing. Actually, they are two apartments stacked on each other. So there is this. It looks like a single family house, but in practice, it is are more two apartments. They also start experimenting with more industrial way of producing housing. So you see this steel structure on the low left with concrete panels mounted on it, just to speed up housing production. And about 1/3 of the housing in those days was constructed with these industrial housing features. Well, yeah, this is what happened, but with this very short-sighted almost perspective on building as much housing units you can, quantity over quality. Yeah, it also came with a lot of problems which we're still facing today. Yeah, we've really faced poor quality, high maintenance costs. The buildings are facing low energy efficiency, so we all have to do these deep retrofits to lower the energy consumption of the housing. They were really produced as one type fits all housing. They were inflexible to accommodate various kind of target groups. They were they're not suitable for accommodating the elderly or disabled. The voice of the customer, the end user, was completely discarded. And then the environmental effect, it was a significant consumption of natural resources, significant deposition of pollutants, including all these greenhouse gas emissions like the carbon emissions. And as we experience today, it's now resulting in a substantial flow of waste materials. And even maybe there were some other issues I cannot which I'm not on my top of my mind right now, but so it also has a lot of side effects doing it this way. So this is something I think we should also try to learn from these lessons from the past. The Second World War is not that long ago, and we have some experience in rebuilding. We know the implications. We now have to come up with all kinds of strategies, as well as showcased in Superlocal, to deal with these issues. Just let's see if we can do it better. But where to start? Well, first of all, if you're going to start demolishing a building, or you're facing a really damaged building because of the warfare, it's still hosting a lot of values. And I borrowed this diagram from a review from Rohrlock and colleagues. Is here they collected all kinds of value frameworks. So this is how you can have a look at value. So what I did is in the green, in the green area, that's actually the value concept that we used for the Superlocal projects, and they were very conceptual ideas which we try to put into a practice. We try to reevaluate how to think about environmental impacts, how to change the construction industry. That are the value concepts we were building up. But what is to be overlooked is that in our properties, it represents a place, and it represents a place where people live. And these cultural, social, and spatial values are often overlooked. And that's not only in practice, also in the scientific debate. These kind of values and retaining these values also from the perspective of the circular economy, they are often disregarded. And with only focusing on these technical aspects and trying to come up with interventions, as we did in the Superlocal project, you have maybe the side effect that you are potentially destroying some valuable assets, as for example, cultural heritage, because that is also what these apartment buildings represent. Also, intentionally, maybe you disregard the social structures, is what we were really struggling with in our project. So there is a huge potential. So what we can start with is to looking at these properties and see what kind of values do we see in it and how can we retain that value. And to help you a little bit, to inspire you a little bit, I say this is not the golden bullet, so to say, but this is a kind of framework I like to offer you how to do it. And I start in the middle on the low side where you have this picture of this urban area. And in terms of the urban transformation of an area, the first thing that you need to inventory is what are the needs and ambitions? And it can be on a very small scale, the urban pixel of the neighborhood, or even at a city or regional level. But what is actually the demand of the end user, the people living there? Then on the right side, and following the arrow is, well, look at it. What is there already? What we can retain? And that can range from energy, from water, from waste streams, from building materials. You can all take that into account, taking the perspective of these various value concepts that I just showcased in the previous slide. And then,
John, sorry to
yeah.
interrupt. There is a question. If I don't know if I understand the question very well, but the person is asking if you know of any examples where mistakes were avoided, where there were no mistakes in the reconstruction. Kind of think it's impossible, but.
If you don't mind,
yeah,
I will first discuss the figure, and then I will answer again because I have an answer. I have an answer to that.
Okay.
But I like because I come back to that. It's in the figure. Let's park that question for a moment. So, if you have these values, then you can start matching them with all kinds of concepts and solutions which are already available in the market, or you can start developing a solution it yourself, and to see how can we retain value and at the same time address the needs of the people living in that area. So let's mix and matching solutions, bringing together supply and demand. Then I come back to the question is, okay. Well, started coming up with intervention, what kind of value is created? But at the same time, if you, with every intervention you suggest, there is not only value creation, it always comes with value destruction. There is always some value lost. So it's not that it's not about, it's something that actually should be negotiated in the project. This can get that. For example, in our case, in the Superlocal case, we try to keep the social structures. There was a promise, but we only succeeded in a very very minimal way, because we find out that in that building there live a lot of elderly, and they were more and more of those elderly were really in demand of care, and we cannot provide it in that area. So in the end we had to reallocate most of the people. So that social structure was lost anyway. So this is something that need to be that's part of the decision-making process. So it's balancing actually value creation and destruction, but you have to keep this in mind. Otherwise, you have maybe some unintentional value loss, and that I think is something you like to prevent. Can you anticipate every kind of value and every kind of asset that you have available? Probably not. That's maybe a little bit utopian, but already start thinking about it. I think it will bring you a step further than not doing anything at that point. So the key question is, which kind of values are created and or destroyed with urban transformation interventions? So that's something that you keep into account. Well, the framework is maybe new, but of course, there are already happily also a lot of people working on this. And this is a website I follow to follow the Ukrainian war and conflict, and but there are also people taking a really matter in its own hands and try to come also up with solutions. So this is I think it was a Japanese guy who built his framework. So that's a digital platform in which you can implement digital scans or multiple photographs of a damaged property, and it's digitalized, and you can then build this digital environment in which you can collect all the damaged buildings. And this is already a good way of making this inventory. What are actually the needs in these neighborhoods? So this kind of pictures are then generated when now you already have an idea of damaged buildings. Well, to teach you a little bit, some of you might see here, a totally lost building. Yeah, okay, demolish it. This is not, how should we start when rebuilding it? Better to totally demolish it and start all over new. But I still see some potential here. And I learned that also by having a more case study perspective, also learned from some other projects. So there's an example from the Netherlands. They had the same issue. They started all with some damaged apartments with fire, and there was a lot of violence, and there was a very bad neighborhood. And they also start thinking about how to use these damaged half apartment buildings. And so they developed various scenarios. The words are in Dutch, so on the top right, you see that they changed the total architecture. They built a top layer, some penthouses or apartment on the existing structure, and totally refurbished that building and modernize it. So what they also did, there were a couple of these structures, some that they really cut down the part of the structure to make it a 2-bay structure, 2-floor structure left, and they turned them in single family housing on the right. So that is so they try to really reuse parts of the building to make something totally different out of it. So this is also really what really triggers me from maybe this could be a concept which is very much applicable on this kind of properties. So I still see some value here. In times of rebuilding, where you have a lot of shortage of building materials, of money, then thinking in this way is really needed, apart from the discussion how you can reduce the environmental impact. Let's see if I can get you inspired, and let's go for a breakout session. So this is what we're going to do. We are with quite some people. You will be subdivided in breakout rooms, and this will be done by Roberto in a couple of minutes. And if you are in a breakout room, I invite you to go to the Miro. It's a digital platform. And in that platform, there is a poster ready for you, at least a framework of a poster still need to be developed. And you are assigned to a breakout session, and that breakout session has a number, and that corresponds with the number on top of your poster. And that's the place where you have to go. And what I like you to do is select by violence affected buildings. You can use the website I was also referring to, but also if you have maybe you're close to a building which is, or maybe even in a building which is heavily damaged at the moment, to some extent, you can take that as a case, put it on the poster, and try to come up with what kind of values you can recognize in that property. And that can be anything. So from very technical environmental aspects, if you're an engineer, that's maybe your most logical perspective. So you have some value frameworks relative to that. But you can also have very socioeconomic, if you're an urbanist or a social worker or something, about what should kind of value these properties still represent, what we should actually take into account rebuilding that place. And try just put it in that poster by using post-its, or use Google as your best friend and come up with some pictures, just to inspire what can be done and tease each other with ideas. This is a brainstorm session. You can do everything, put in there everything you like.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
Look, we have a technical problem. We cannot create breakout rooms in this session. So I have created a new session for Google, and the address of the new session is already in your mailbox. I've just sent it to you, and it's also in the chat here. We are going to close this session, and we are going to open a new one where we can create breakout rooms. Otherwise, we cannot create them here because of the limitations of the webinar. Is it okay, John? If we
For me, it's
that?
totally fine. I think we could start working on it. It's only 15 minutes is maximum, so you need to be. It's your try to come up with as many ideas as you can imagine. Feel free, even if they are maybe utopian, but try to come up with ideas, values you still think should be reclaimed with rebuilding that property.
I will. Yes, Caroline.
John, can I also ask you to copy paste the Miro link in the chat of this session and maybe the new session as well, because we cannot click it on the slide, of course.
That's a good suggestion.
The Miro board, I will send as soon as we get to the new session, but I will also post it here now. But first of all, I think for organization's sake, I will close the session. The link is in your email, but it's also in the chat. You can just open the new session as soon as I close this one. I apologize for this, but it's a technical problem. So see you in a few seconds. I will end this session now. Thanks a lot. See you.